Complex software sales is not complicated, believe it or not. You just need to have the right system to support you. And that's what I'm going to walk you through today. I'm going to walk you through the methodology that's used by many of the top software organizations in the world to help them win more complex sales cycles. And that methodology is called MEDDICC. And I did not create this. This has been around for a long time. But I'm going to walk you through is what it is, how and when to leverage it, give you example questions to ask, and get pretty granular. We're going to nerd out for a few minutes so that you can take action, implement this right away for your business so you can win more. Now, real quickly, what is it? This is a sales qualification methodology, not to be confused with the sales methodology itself. But the whole goal of this is to help you analyze and inspect your deals so you can win more. And what MEDDICC stands for is metrics, economic buyer, decision criteria, decision process, identify pain, champion, and competition. Now, some pro tips or things to think about in regards to when to apply MEDDICC. This is for complex deals or strategic accounts that it might be a smaller deal, but you see a lot of upside. This is not to be used with SMB or simple transactions because it's actually going to do more harm than good. And then again, this is not a sales process. This is a sales qualification methodology to help you inspect your deals to identify the red flags. So let's dig in. Metrics. Metrics are the quantifiable results. This is how they're going to justify the investment. And there's two ways they typically look at this. Number one is bottom line, which typically cost savings related, or there's top line, whether it's increasing revenue, increasing profits. Those are the types of things that they're going to look at for this. And a couple questions for you to ask to help you flesh out the metrics part of the evaluation. How would you measure the success of your project? What metrics around cost, efficiency, or business outcomes do you need to achieve in the next 12 months? And then finally, how would this success be measured by the business? So a couple key words here. There's measured, there's metrics, then there's value for you, then there's value for the business. So these are the things that help you paint a picture of how they're thinking about this evaluation or your solution potentially helping their business move forward. Now let's move on to economic buyer. So the economic buyer is also known as the EB. This is the person that ultimately says yes. It gets confused with decision maker. I'll explain that in a sec. But thing to know, if you can meet with a real economic buyer and they support the project and they are on board to sponsor this, know that your chances of winning the deal go through the roof. In fact, the studies say once you have that meeting, your chance of winning the deal goes north of 50%. Thing to know is this usually doesn't happen right away. It could happen a few weeks or even a few months into the sales cycle. So it's a meeting that you definitely need to earn in most cases. But the thing to know is most people are not the EB. So here's a question for you to ask to see if someone is the true economic buyer. And the question is, if you're on board and you want to move forward with us, is there anybody else formally or informally that you need to run this by to get sign off on the budget? Very important to ask this question early because when deals stall out or things that you fail at the finish line, one of the big reasons is you think you're dealing with the economic buyer when you're really just dealing with some of the decision makers in the process. And I'll explain a little bit more when we get to that. Now, once you get to the economic buyer, question to ask, hey, do you sponsor this project? Yes or no? This is a big evaluation in most cases, 6, 7, even 8 figures. You need to know that they're on board with this. Next, what does success look like for you personally? And then last, hey, if we fulfill the success criteria, what happens next? To help you understand what are the things that need to happen to get it across the finish line. Now that's economic buyer. Let's move on to decision criteria. Now there's two different ways to look at decision criteria. There's technical decision criteria, aka can we physically do what they're looking for in a solution? Then there's business criteria, aka where is the funding for this solution going to come from? And you need to ask those questions. So on the technical side, hey, what are the technical requirements that you have? Get clear on those, get black and white. And then for the business criteria, hey, how are you going to calculate the business case to justify the investment? So it's not just how are you going to justify, but how are you going to calculate the business case to justify? And that'll help you align with them. And a pro tip I want to share with you, if you can influence the decision criteria, that's going to significantly stack the deck in your favor. And here's an example. If it's a CRM evaluation And one of your competitive advantages is you have a very user-friendly mobile app. Well, if that's not in their initial criteria, if you can insert that, put some weight behind that, and they agree with that criteria, that's going to stack the deck in your favor against the competition. So understanding what the criteria is, then if you can influence that, even better. So let's building onto that. After we have the decision criteria, we need to know the decision process. So the criteria is what are the boxes we need to check. Think of the processes, hey, in what order, how do we get there? And it's typically broken down into three different areas when you're selling these big complex deals: technical, business, and paper, otherwise known as legal. So questions to ask is, hey, what are the steps that need to be taken and in what order to address the criteria in the evaluation? Next, who are involved in which steps to reach a decision? Very important. It's going to be different people involved at different stages, and people from the business side are going to be different than the technical side to help them come to a conclusion. And then, very important here, for timing out and forecasting, how long do each of these steps historically take to complete? This is going to help you reverse engineer the path to success and help you forecast when this deal is going to come in, if it's going to come in. And the best way for them to tell you that is historical. When was the last time they evaluated a solution like this, and how long did it take? So how long that? What's also important to know is when you're selling enterprise sales, the process can very much change from a $100,000 evaluation to a multi-million-dollar evaluation. So ask them, does the process change? Is it different, or how is it different? And then last but not least, when it comes to the legal and paper process, how is your legal process structured? Is it in-house? Do you have someone on retainer? Are there specific terms and conditions that are non-negotiables for you? Tell me about that. And the whole goal of these questions is to get the process outlined for the business, the technical, and the legal paper process. And if you think about it, these are three different processes. So if you're executing well, you should be working through all three of these in parallel, not one, then the other, then the other. That just drags out your sales cycle. So by understanding all three of these up front and outlining this and documenting it, it's going to help you take action and shorten your sales cycle, which increases your win rates. And after the decision process, one of the things we have to know is, what is the pain? Did we identify pain in this deal? If there's no pain, there's no sale. It's that simple. And the pain can be technical or business focused. And it typically falls under one of four categories: time, cost, risk, revenue. And what's important to know is when you think about the pain of the project, they have to do something. When I think about an evaluation, you want to answer the three questions: why anything, why us, why now? And if there's no pain, I'm not going to do anything. So that box has got to be checked. They got to be clear. They have to make a decision. They have to have their mind set on making a change. And that's where this comes into play. And you're going to think about it both direct and indirect, because there's consequences of not solving a pain directly and then indirectly. So for this example, hey, if this can't integrate, it takes us twice as much time as we need to do the proper analysis on our clients. That's the direct pain. Their indirect pain is, well, because of that, we can't address our customer concerns as fast as we like, and that's hurting our NPS scores. So think about that. So your solution may not be an NPS solution, but you can solve the root cause of the areas that's driving down their NPS scores. So this is how you think about identifying the pain. And here's a couple questions to ask. Hey, what's wrong with the current state? If it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? So get clear on what's wrong with it. What does the issue mean for both you, the person, and the company? And then pressure test. What happens if you do nothing? How big of a problem is this? If they can keep going, then you may not have a deal on your hands. That's why it's really important to pressure test it with that question. Play devil's advocate. So building onto that, if there's no pain, there's no sale. Well, if there's no champion, then your deal's never get across the finish line, because the pain lets you know whether or not you actually have a deal, but the champion is the person who ultimately gets it done, because this person has skin in the game, and they're going to be the person that's going to get you in the right room. They're a mover and shaker. They're someone who's well respected by their peers, and they have a vested interest in helping you win the deal. And the thing to know, there's a question to ask, like, what do you look for in a champion? Because if they can't get you in the right room, they're not a champion. If they're not someone who's ambitious, trying to disrupt the organization, moving up the ranks, then they're probably not a great champion for you. And these are the things that are going to help you vet out whether or not you're attaching yourself to the right person. So a question to ask yourself is, why is this person a champion for me? What's in it for them personally? Do they actually have influence? And will they sell for you behind closed doors? And there's a way to test that. So competition. This is commonly neglected, even though people commonly talk about competition in their deals, but it's very rarely given the weight that is necessary to properly align with it. Because there's always going to be competition in your deals. Even if they tell you there is no competition, there is still competition. And the most important and most common competition is status quo, meaning doing nothing, or taking the project in-house. So if you've ever heard of the build versus buy scenario, this comes into play all the time, because at surface level they're going to think it's going to be less expensive to do it themselves. So that's where total cost of ownership can come into play. But know that that's a competition. And what I want to warn you about is, just because you talk about competition early in the cycle doesn't mean you shouldn't ask it again. So when you talk to the manager level, ask about competition. Director, VP, C-suite. At every level, you should be fleshing out the competition, making sure that new competition isn't coming into the fold later in the evaluation. So questions to ask. Hey, who are you looking at and why? Could you get by if you did nothing? Have you ever built a solution in-house before? And who is a fan of the other options? If there's a champion of a competitor of yours, you want to know that internally, because it's your champion versus their champion. Then you want to know who has more influence in the organization. So you're going to know whether or not you have a good chance here. So building on this, some pro tips for you to implement all the framework that I just walked you through. Number one, it's really helpful to have an internal scorecard just so you can assess your deals and then discuss them regularly internally, weekly, bi-weekly, have a cadence, because there's going to be red flags all over your deals. So the goal is to identify all the red flags, identify who needs to do what, and delegate and assign action items to assess them. And number three, always assume the worst until you're proven otherwise. You never get happy years. That's not how it works in complex sales. There's always something that you're not thinking about. There's landmines everywhere. So if you go in with the mindset of that versus being overly optimistic, it's going to help you plan accordingly. And then, I can't stress this enough, prioritize identifying and testing your champion. Because again, this is the person that helps you get the deal across the finish line. So try to figure out who's that mover and shaker and test them. And way to test them is you ask them to get you in the room with somebody. And if they're willing to do that, then you know you have a potential champion on your hands. If it's someone that they can't get you in the room with, then someone else needs to be the champion. Doesn't mean this person can't be helpful for you, but doesn't mean that they qualify as a champion. So that's MEDDICC. It's an incredible methodology. I'm a massive fan of it. I've been using it for the last 12 years or so, and it's been really helpful for my career. And it's used by a lot of the top organizations in the world. So that's going to be really helpful for you. I want you to use this, implement it, go burn it down. My name is Justin J. Johnson, founder and creator of the Beautiful Savage Sales Academy. I'll see you in the next video.